He returned to the diner. After 40 years, what he found at table 6 left him in tears. He hadn't seen the place in 40 years, but the second he pulled off the highway and spotted the rusted sign, something caught in his chest. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The diner looked smaller now. Most things from childhood do. The paint was faded, the letters on the sign were chipped and hanging slightly crooked, and the gravel parking lot had more weeds than gravel. But it was still there. Same lot. Same front windows. Same metal trim around the door. For a second, he sat in the car with the engine running, just staring. It didn't feel real. He had driven hundreds of miles without thinking too hard about it. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. Maybe just closure. Maybe nothing. But now that he was here, it didn't feel like nothing. He turned off the engine. The silence hit hard. He opened the door slowly, stepped out, and stood there for a moment, taking it in. A delivery truck rumbled past behind him. A couple of birds scattered from the weeds. Otherwise, it was quiet. No music, no crowd, just the same hum the diner always had. The last time he stood in this spot, he was a boy. The last time he walked through those doors, his father was beside him. Now he was almost 70. He stepped onto the cracked sidewalk and walked toward the entrance. The handle on the door was the same. Same rounded shape, same chrome finish, now dull and spotted from time. He pulled it open. A small bell above the door gave a soft ring. The sound was exactly the same as it had been all those years ago. Inside, not much had changed. The layout was identical. Counter stools in front, booths along the windows, and a row of tables leading to the back wall. A waitress stood behind the counter pouring coffee. A couple of older men sat in a booth near the door. They looked up, then back down. He stood for a moment just inside, letting the door close behind him. It smelled the same too. Bacon, coffee, griddle oil, the kind of smell that sinks into the walls and stays for decades. The waitress behind the counter gave him a quick nod. He nodded back but didn't speak. He didn't ask for a menu. He didn't glance around or hesitate. He just walked slowly to the back corner of the diner, to the booth by the window with the dented napkin holder and the crack in the seat. Table 6. It was exactly where it had always been. Same spot, same view of the back alley, same scuff marks on the floor around it. He slid into the booth and sat down. The cushion hissed a little under his weight. He placed both hands on the table, fingers spread, palms flat. For a long time, he just sat there like that, not moving, not speaking, just breathing, looking, remembering. He used to sit on the inside seat, pressed up against the wall, swinging his feet under the table while his dad read the paper. The waitress always brought him orange juice in a small glass with a chipped rim. His dad drank black coffee and ordered eggs over easy. They came here every Sunday, rain or shine. Sometimes they didn't talk much. Sometimes they did. It was the only place they ever felt like father and son. Outside of this booth, things were different. Quiet. Distant. But here, for those few hours, they felt close. He hadn't planned on feeling this much. He thought maybe the place would be gone, or that it would look completely different. But it didn't. And the second he sat down, everything came back. The weight of what they had, and the weight of how suddenly it ended. A soft clink from the counter pulled him back. The waitress was pouring another cup of coffee. She looked over again, studying him this time. Maybe she thought she recognized something in his face. Maybe not. He looked down at the table. There were initials carved into the corner. Not his. But he remembered doing the same thing once. pressing a key into the wood when no one was looking. A kid trying to leave a mark. He rubbed his thumb slowly across the surface. There was no menu in front of him. He didn't need one. He wasn't here for the food. He was here because he had nowhere else to go with this memory. He was here because something in him still hadn't let go. The bell over the door rang again, but he didn't turn around. His eyes stayed fixed on the table. The waitress moved behind the counter, sliding a plate in front of another customer, refilling a cup, wiping her hands on a towel. He watched her without meaning to. Her hair was shorter now, but he knew the way she moved. Quick, practiced, like someone who'd done this job 1,000 times. She'd been young when he saw her last, probably no more than 20. He remembered her laugh, the way she always called him sweetheart, without sounding fake. She didn't recognize him. That part didn't surprise him. It had been too long. People change. Faces fade. But watching her now, there was still something in the way she poured coffee and nodded at customers that felt familiar. Like a piece of his past had stayed put while everything else had kept moving. She finished at the counter and walked toward his table, holding a small pad and a pen. "Morning," she said with a quick smile. "Can I get you started with coffee?" He nodded once. "Sure." She poured from the pot without asking anything else, then set the mug down in front of him. It was thick ceramic, white with a faint chip on the handle. He picked it up with both hands and just held it for a second. Warm, steady. "You been in before?" she asked, casual. He didn't look up right away. Then he nodded. "A long time ago." She smiled again, this time slower. "Well, welcome back." Then she was gone, back toward the counter, moving like someone who had a rhythm to keep. He watched her step behind the register, laugh softly at something a man said near the door, and then reach into the cooler for a bottle of orange juice. The juice caught him. He hadn't thought about it until now, but she used to bring him the same thing every Sunday. He hadn't tasted it in decades. The memory came back hard. Cold glass, sweet and sharp. His dad always let him drink it before the food came, which felt like a small freedom, one of the only ones he had back then. He looked back down at the table. The seat across from him was empty. It used to be his father's. That was the thing about time. You think it dulls everything, but it doesn't. Some moments stay sharp no matter how many years pass. Some people never really leave. He thought he'd moved on, built a life, had kids, paid bills, watched seasons come and go. But now, sitting here, all of that felt like noise. What he remembered was the quiet, the way his dad would stir his coffee twice, never 3 times. The way he folded the newspaper and tapped the corner against the table. The way his voice always dropped when he asked, "Everything all right, son?" He never knew how to answer that. Most days he just nodded. And then one day he stopped hearing the question. His father stopped coming. No warning, no conversation. Just gone. He waited a few Sundays, then a few more. The waitress eventually asked where his dad was. He didn't know what to say. She gave him a free milkshake that day, said it was on the house, said he was welcome any time. He never came back. Until now. A man near the window laughed. Someone dropped a spoon. The jukebox clicked into the start of an old country song, and the place went on like it always had, like nothing had changed. But something had. He wasn't the boy anymore. He was the man sitting alone, holding coffee that didn't taste right, listening for a voice that wasn't coming back. And across from him, that seat stayed empty. He didn't come here for a conversation. He didn't come to reconnect or explain anything. He came for this booth, this exact spot. Table 6. It was the only place that hadn't changed. The same crack ran down the vinyl seat across from him, like a scar that had been there forever. The Formica table had new scratches, but the corners were still worn the same way. The metal edge had the same small dent where someone once dropped a coffee pot. The salt and pepper shakers were plastic now, not glass, but they were in the same spot. He hadn't thought he'd remember those details. But once he sat down, it all came back. He slid into the booth and leaned back. The seat let out a small creak. He looked out the window. Weeds pushed up through the alley pavement. A chain-link fence ran along the back lot, same as before. Someone had spray-painted initials on the side of the dumpster. Same kind of thing he would have done at 14. His hands rested flat on the table. He looked at them. The skin was older now, thinner, a little spotted. But the way he placed them, fingers spread, palms down, was the same as when he was a kid. He used to sit like that, waiting for the food, trying not to bounce his legs under the table. His dad would fold the paper, look up, and ask him how school was going. It was always a short answer. Fine. That was usually enough. Some days they barely talked, some days they did, but they always sat here. This table, this booth. He never asked his dad why they came here every Sunday. It just became their thing. Quiet booth in the corner, same breakfast order, same seat by the window. No big moments, no deep talks, just routine. But it mattered, especially now, because it was all he had left. The waitress passed by again. She glanced down at him, smiled, then kept walking. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. She didn't recognize him, and he didn't expect her to. She had probably served 100 people a week for the last 40 years. His face wouldn't stand out now. He sipped the coffee. It was too bitter, too hot, but it gave his hands something to do. Across from him, the seat stayed empty. He stared at it for a long time. There were things he wanted to say, things he wished he had said when he was younger. But that window was closed. His father left without warning. No argument, no explanation. Just one Sunday gone, then another, then all of them. He remembered sitting in the booth by himself the week after, waiting, watching the door, thinking maybe he was just late. He wasn't. Eventually, he stopped coming. And now, all these years later, he was back. Not because he thought he'd find anything new, but because he needed to sit here. He needed to see it again, feel it again. Remember what it was like when things felt stable, even if only for an hour every Sunday. The seat across from him stayed quiet. He reached out and touched the table edge with his fingertips. There was a tiny groove there, almost invisible. He remembered scratching it with a spoon when he was bored one day. It was still there, after all this time. That's what hit him. This table remembered him, even if no one else did. The coffee went cold. The waitress hadn't come back. He didn't mind. He wasn't in a hurry. He hadn't driven all this way for service. He came for silence, for stillness, for this moment. He looked at the empty seat one more time, and for the first time in years, he said the words out loud, just above a whisper. "I still come back here, Dad." The booth didn't answer, but it didn't need to. The sound of silverware clinking on plates filled the space around him, but it felt distant, like background noise to something heavier. He sat still, his hands wrapped loosely around the mug. He hadn't touched the coffee in a while. It had gone lukewarm. He didn't care. He was watching the door. He didn't know why. Maybe some small part of him thought someone might walk in who remembered. A face from that time. One of the regulars. Someone who used to sit at the counter or read the paper in the booth across the aisle. But nobody did. The people here now were younger, not by much, but enough. New faces, new stories. Living out their routines without knowing his had brought him back to this exact spot. He shifted in the booth, glanced over toward the register. The waitress was laughing again, this time with a man wearing a flannel jacket and a ball cap. She tapped the register keys, handed him his change, and waved him off with a smile. Same smile he remembered from years ago. But she still hadn't recognized him. He wondered if he should say something. Ask her if she remembered the boy who used to sit at this table every Sunday, the one who always ordered the same thing, who never talked much, who disappeared one day and never came back. But he didn't, because it didn't feel like her job to remember him. He was the one who left. He reached for the coffee again, took a sip. It was cold, bitter, but this time he drank it anyway. It made him think about the way his dad used to drink his coffee black. Never added sugar, never cream, just hot and strong. Said it cleared his head, said it helped him think. He never told his dad that he didn't like it. He drank it black too, just to match him. He wanted to be like him, back then at least. The door opened again, and a breeze came through. He didn't turn around. Instead, he looked at the menu lying flat on the table. The cover was new, laminated. The design had changed. But when he opened it, some of the items were still the same. 2 eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns. That was the order. Every Sunday. No changes, no questions. He closed the menu. He already knew what it said. The waitress came by again, coffee pot in hand. She motioned toward his cup. Warm up? He nodded. Sure. She poured without another word, but then she paused. You sure you've never been in here before? She asked, studying his face. He looked up at her. A long time ago, he said. She nodded slowly. I don't know. Something about you looks familiar. He gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe just one of those faces. She didn't press, just gave a short shrug and moved on. He watched her walk away. Then he looked out the window again. The street was quiet. A few cars passed. A couple of people walked by. But the world outside didn't know he was here. Didn't know what this table meant. Didn't know what it had held. He rubbed his hand across the surface again, fingers brushing over the edge, over that same groove. It felt like a line in time, before and after, then and now. The space across from him felt heavier than it had in years. He could almost see his father sitting there, arms crossed, eyes on the paper, asking him about school or baseball or whatever came to mind. He could almost hear his voice, but then it was gone again. Just like that. He sat back and took another sip. The coffee was still bitter, still black, but he didn't add anything. Some habits never leave you. He hadn't planned on staying this long. The idea was to stop in, sit at the booth, maybe have a coffee, and leave. But now it was past noon. People had come and gone. Tables had turned over. The waitress had been by a few more times, and each time she looked a little more curious. He hadn't ordered food, just the coffee. He wasn't hungry. Something about being here took away his appetite. Across from him, the seat stayed empty. He tried not to stare at it anymore. It made him feel foolish, like he was waiting for someone who had no chance of walking through the door. But memories had a way of taking over, even when you didn't ask them to. He remembered one Sunday. He was 13. His dad had picked him up a little late, said he had car trouble. They didn't talk much that day. Just sat at the table like always, ordered their usual, and listened to the sounds of the diner fill in the silence. But near the end of the meal, his dad had said something he never forgot. "You're not a kid forever, you know. One day, you're going to have to figure things out on your own." He hadn't responded, didn't know what to say. He remembered just nodding and looking down at his plate. But the words stuck. Even now, 40 years later, they still rang in his ears. He had figured things out. Eventually. But not the way his dad probably imagined. After his father left, there had been a lot of figuring out. Figuring out how to finish high school on his own. Figuring out how to work nights and still keep his grades up. Figuring out how to stop waiting for someone to come back who never did. He'd gone on to live a life. A full one. College. Work. Marriage. Kids. All the pieces people are supposed to put together. But there was always something missing. A part of the picture that didn't quite feel finished. He never talked about it. Not to friends. Not even to his wife. He just kept moving. Until now. Now he was sitting at the table that started it all, looking across at a seat no one else noticed, remembering a man who vanished without warning. The bell above the door rang again. This time it was different. A man stepped in, older, maybe late 60s, with a limp and a tired face. He looked around like he wasn't sure he was in the right place. His eyes scanned the room slowly, the counter, the booths, the back wall. Then they landed on the same table. Table 6. He walked past it without stopping. Just moved toward the counter and took a seat on the far end. Ordered coffee. Said nothing else. He watched him for a moment. Something about the way the man sat, shoulders tight, hands fidgeting with the edge of a napkin, felt familiar. Not the man himself, but the posture, the tension, the quiet. He wondered how many people had come back here for similar reasons, looking for a place that remembered them, even if no one else did. The waitress refilled his coffee again without asking. "You doing okay?" she asked. He looked up. Her tone had changed, softer now, a little more careful. "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking." She nodded. "That happens a lot around here. People come in, sit at an old table, and just remember." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. She walked away, and he sat there in the quiet again. The sun was moving now, casting a soft glare on the table. He could see dust in the air, floating, slow, and aimless. He thought about getting up, about leaving, about walking out the door and letting this place stay a memory again. But something kept him there. Maybe it was the booth. Maybe it was the unfinished feeling. Maybe it was that deep down hope that something still waited for him here. Something he hadn't seen yet. He didn't know. All he knew was he wasn't ready to go. He finally ordered food. It wasn't because he was hungry. It was just something to do. Something to keep his hands busy while his mind stayed where it had been all day. The waitress brought it out without much comment. Same as before. 2 eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns. She set it down and gave him a quick look, like maybe she wanted to ask him something. But she didn't. He picked up his fork and pushed the food around for a while. Then he took a bite. It tasted exactly the way he remembered. Not perfect, not fancy, but familiar. That was the word for it. Familiar. He wondered how many people sat in diners like this one across the country, just chasing that same feeling, trying to hold on to something they'd lost or left behind. He looked over at the counter. The man with the limp was still there, nursing a second coffee, eyes fixed on the floor. Something about him stuck. He tried to shake it, but it wouldn't go. The shape of his shoulders, the way he stirred his coffee, the way he kept glancing at the front window like he was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. He took another bite and forced himself to stop watching. Focus on the food. Focus on the moment. He looked down at the plate, then up at the waitress walking by. He stopped her with a quiet word. "Excuse me." She turned. "Yeah? Do you remember anyone who used to sit at this table? Years ago. A man and a boy." She tilted her head, thinking. "Hard to say. I mean, I've been here a long time, but that's a lot of faces. You got a time frame?" He hesitated. Early 80s, maybe 83 or 84. Sundays, usually. She looked at the table, then back at him. "That's specific. Was it you?" He nodded slowly. She seemed to study him differently then. "You came with your dad?" "Yeah." She stood there a second longer. "I remember a man, big guy, quiet, always tipped in cash, kept his coat on even when it was warm out. That him?" He gave a slight smile. "Yeah, that sounds right." She nodded. "You disappeared after a while. I used to wonder what happened to you." He looked down. "Life happened." "Yeah," she said, almost to herself. "It always does." She walked away, and he sat back against the booth. That feeling in his chest again. Something tightening, something heavy. Across the room, the man with the limp stood up. He left some cash on the counter, nodded at the cook behind the window, and made his way toward the exit. As he passed, he glanced over at the table. Their eyes met, just for a second. Something flickered there. Recognition, maybe. Or confusion. But then he pushed the door open and stepped out into the afternoon light. He stared at the door long after it shut. The bell above it swayed once, then stopped. He didn't know why it got to him. He finished his meal slowly. Every bite brought back something different. A conversation. A Sunday. A look from his father that meant more than words ever did. After a while, he waved the waitress over again. "Mind if I ask something else?" he said. "Sure." "That man who just left, does he come here often?" She glanced toward the door. "Him? Yeah, every week. Usually Thursdays. Always the same order. Doesn't talk much." "Do you know his name?" She paused. "I think it's Joe. Joe something. Why?" He shook his head. "Just curious." She refilled his coffee again and moved along. No more questions. But now his hands were shaking just a little. He stared out the window. The street was empty again. And in his chest, a question formed. Quiet. Unwelcome. But impossible to ignore. Could it be? After all these years? He sat still for a long time. The plate was empty. The coffee was cold again. And outside, the wind picked up, pushing a few dry leaves across the sidewalk. He hadn't come looking for answers. But now that one might be close, he didn't know what to do with it. He came back the next Thursday. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, didn't explain why. Just got in the car, drove the 2 hours from his house, and pulled into the same gravel spot behind the diner like he had the week before. It was late morning, a little past 10. The parking lot was almost empty. He sat in the car for a few minutes before going in, watching, thinking, running through all the things he might say if the man showed up again. If it was him. He still wasn't sure. But the look on the man's face when their eyes met last time, there was something there. Something that didn't feel like coincidence. He got out of the car and stepped inside. The same waitress smiled when she saw him. "Back again?" "Yeah," he said. She didn't press. Just handed him a menu he didn't need and filled a cup with coffee. "Same table?" she asked. He nodded. The booth felt the same. Same sun on the table, same view out the window, same ache in his chest. He didn't order food this time. He wasn't sure how long he'd be there. He just waited. The door opened once. A couple came in, sat near the back. Then again, a delivery guy. Then it opened a third time. The man walked in. Same coat, same limp, same slow walk toward the counter. He took the same seat as last time, far end, nodded to the cook, said nothing. He watched him from the booth, trying to piece together the years. 40 is a long time. People change. Faces change. But some things don't. There was something in the way the man sat, slightly leaned forward, right hand always resting on the edge of the counter, that brought something back. He waited. 15 minutes passed. Finally he stood up, left some cash on the table, and walked slowly over to the counter. The man didn't look up when he stood beside him. He cleared his throat once. Quiet. "Excuse me," he said. The man turned. "Yeah?" He looked into his face. Older, worn, thinner than he remembered. But the eyes, he recognized those eyes. "You ever come here back in the 80s? The man looked confused. "80s? Yeah. Sundays. You'd bring a boy, sit at the back table, always paid in cash." The man's eyes narrowed. He looked closer. A few seconds passed before he said anything. "You're—" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. It's me." Silence settled between them. Heavy. Thick. The man looked down, rubbed a hand over his face. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I wasn't sure it was you," he said. "Last week. But something felt familiar." The man nodded, still not looking at him. "I came back years ago. Asked about you. They said you stopped coming one day and never came back." "I was 15, got tired of waiting." "I know," the man said quietly. Another long pause. "You could have reached out," he added. The man nodded again, still staring at his coffee. "I should have. I wanted to. I just didn't know how." He sat down on the stool next to him. "Why'd you stop coming?" The man took a slow breath. "I thought I was doing the right thing, letting you live your life. I didn't think I had anything left to offer." "You were my dad," he said. "That would have been enough." The man turned to him then, eyes glassy, jaw tight. "I'm sorry." The words came low, barely a whisper. "I've waited a long time to hear that," he said. They sat there quietly. The waitress watched from the far end of the diner but didn't come over. For the first time in 4 decades, they were sitting side by side again. Not as strangers. Not anymore. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was the only one still remembering. They sat there for almost an hour without saying much. There wasn't a rush. No one asked them to move. The diner had its usual rhythm, plates clinking, the hum of the overhead fan, the sound of coffee being poured again and again. But around them, everything felt still. The waitress brought over a fresh pot and set it on the counter. "Figured you two might want a refill," she said with a half smile. Neither of them said no. He wrapped his hands around the mug. It gave him something to do while the words kept forming in his head and falling apart before he could say them. Finally, he broke the silence. "You know, I used to sit at that table and watch the door every Sunday. Thought maybe you'd come back." The older man didn't respond right away. He looked down at the counter, then turned his mug slowly between both hands. "I almost did," he said. "A lot of times." "Why didn't you?" He let out a breath. "Because I thought I'd already messed everything up." You did. The man flinched a little, but he didn't argue. He just nodded. I thought about writing, he said. Tried a few times. But every time I started, I didn't know how to explain why I left, or why I stayed gone. You could have said anything, he replied. I would have listened. I was a kid. I didn't need the right words. I just needed something. They both looked forward again. He thought about all the birthdays, the graduations, the moments that passed without a phone call or a letter. He had stopped wondering why a long time ago. But now, with his father sitting beside him, those questions returned in full force. I joined the army, he said after a while. His father looked over. Did you? He nodded. 20 years. I figured if I couldn't have a father, I'd at least try to be the kind of man I thought one should be. His father's jaw clenched slightly. You were always tougher than I was. It wasn't about tough. The older man nodded, then looked down. I missed all of it. Yes, you did. Silence again. He didn't want to be cruel, but he wasn't going to lie about it either. You know, his father said quietly, I used to come by here sometimes and just sit out in the parking lot. Didn't go in. Just sat there. He turned to him. Why? I don't know, his father replied. To feel close, maybe. To remember what it used to be like. He didn't know how to respond to that. He never imagined his father driving out here all those years later, sitting in the same gravel lot where he parked now, just watching the door and doing nothing. He felt something shift inside. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe understanding. The door to the diner opened. Another customer walked in, ordered something to go, then left. They stayed seated. He asked, Do you have a family now? His father shook his head. No. Thought about it once or twice, but I never started over. You ever wonder what would have happened if you stayed? His father looked straight ahead. Every day. It wasn't easy hearing that, but it felt honest. The waitress came by again. You two need anything else? He looked at his father, then back at her. Can we get 2 meals? Eggs, toast, bacon, just like always. She nodded and walked off. His father gave a soft smile. Like old times. Not quite, he said. But it was something. The food came and they ate, slowly, without much talk. He didn't know where this would go, or if anything could be fixed after so much time had passed. But for the first time in 40 years, he didn't feel like a question waiting for an answer. He felt seen, and maybe, just maybe, so did the man sitting next to him. They left the diner together. The morning had faded into early afternoon. The sun hung higher now, casting sharper shadows on the sidewalk and the gravel lot. He walked a step ahead at first, but slowed as they reached the door, held it open, let his father step out before him. Neither of them said much as they crossed the lot, just the sound of footsteps and the distant hum of the highway. When they got to his car, he turned and leaned against the door. So now what? His father looked at him. I don't know. It wasn't a weak answer. It was honest. After 4 decades, there were no easy next steps, no big gestures that could fix it all. But there was still time. I don't expect anything, he said. I'm not trying to recreate something that's gone. His father nodded. I wouldn't even know how. But if you're willing, he added, we could try to get to know each other. For real this time. No disappearing. His father didn't answer right away. He looked out at the road, then at the diner behind them, then finally back at him. I'd like that. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Simple. And maybe that's what made it matter. He opened the driver's side door, then paused. "Here," he said, reaching into the back seat. He pulled out a small notebook, worn cover, spiral bound. "This has my number, my address, everything." His father took it, turned it in his hands. "I'll use it," he said. "I hope so." He didn't hug him, didn't reach out. There was still space between them. And maybe that was okay. Maybe it didn't need to be closed all at once. His father stepped back. "I'll see you soon," he said. "Yeah," he replied. "I think you will." Then he got in the car, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, he saw his father standing there, notebook in hand, watching him go. It hit him harder than he expected. This was the man he used to wait for. The man who used to sit across from him at table 6 with coffee in hand, always saying less than he should have, but always showing up. Until he didn't. Now here he was again. Older. Smaller somehow. But there. The drive home felt different. Lighter. The miles passed quietly. He thought about all the years he'd spent carrying that question. Why he left. Why he never came back. For so long it had lived inside him like a weight. And now, while it wasn't gone, it wasn't as heavy. He got home around dusk, let himself in. The house was quiet, familiar. He set his keys down on the table and saw the empty frame still sitting there by the front door. It had been there for years. Waiting. He walked over to the drawer in the hallway, dug through old albums, found the photo. It was from the diner, early 80s. He was a kid, maybe 7, sitting at the booth, smiling. His father was next to him, one arm draped across the back of the seat, a coffee cup in his other hand. They both looked relaxed, like they had all the time in the world. He slipped the photo into the frame, set it up straight. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a placeholder. He stepped back and looked at it. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life didn't work that way. But it was something. A start. And maybe that's all it needed to be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.